HighBridge, a division of Recorded Books, presents Night Came with Many Stars by Simon Van Booy. Read by Courtney Patterson. Carol, 1933. After checking for his truck in the front yard, Carol hurried downstairs to scour the cupboards for some breakfast. She sang because the house was empty. Her voice filled each room like invisible writing. Finally, under the stairs, in a crate hidden by some Model T tires, she discovered flour in a round tin the government had given them last year. She carried it to the kitchen table, then went outside to the well, still barefoot and moving quickly through the wet, nodding grass and green weeds. Carol knew the water was cold from how the rope smelled in her hands. The bucket glugged from a black pool fed by a slow river that was even deeper than the bones of her grandpa, who had died in a plowed field with no sound, just a quick folding up into the brown waves. Carol could hardly speak then, but she remembered the body being brought to the house with his face the color of winter. Her father sold the land after that, put down the old man's tools, and picked up a bottle, a deck of cards, a gun when necessary. Carol hauled the full bucket inside, trying not to spill. Her daddy would return soon, and like a dark spirit, see through every fallen drop, as if each were an eye and her life a succession of small, glaring mistakes. She had woken up hungry with the desire for an egg, but the chickens were long gone. A scar on her back proved it. Sometimes Carol reached around and fingered the scar, pushed on the memory knitted beneath. The henhouse door had been left open and coyotes got in. The morning her father had found it empty, he yanked and ripped at the coop until it rose like a stiff net. There was spit whipping from his mouth as he pulled at the frame, snapping thin ribs of wood. Carol had squeezed into a kitchen cupboard where she could smell the sweat from behind her knees. She thought about crawling under the porch, but the darkness there, the rotting planks and those limp, eyeless creatures roaming the damp soil was terror of a different kind. When her daddy came to a wood slat that wouldn't break, his rage changed course, and he followed it into the house, eyes churning with fury. That was years ago, now, though Carol still liked to imagine the coyotes' eyes glowing with careful intent as they carried her father's birds, wet in their mouths, to a place more smell than touch. When Carol outgrew the cupboards, she made for the deep woods, where she could be lost without being lost from herself. They were a refuge, an exhalation, except when snow lay thick and drifted and the cold tore at anything it could touch. Then Carol waited for spring the way a person waits for some beloved friend who has already begun the long journey home. At the end of winter, with the cold still loose but weak, Carol would enter the woods, wade through currents of dead leaves, watching for a single eye of color that meant it was close. She wondered where those early flowers came from, how they knew the moment to blink their eyes in the soil. A small clearing in the forest was Carol's favorite place. She could lie on her back beneath the blank canvas of sky. When her mother was alive, they would spread a yellow cloth, then sit and eat apples. Carol cannot remember anything her mother said, only the sound of her voice, and that she sometimes took off her shoes and unfastened her hair so that it tumbled like ribbon upon her shoulders and neck. Carol found some dry branches near the back door and broke the wood into pieces. Then she lit a fire in the stove and mixed flour, baking powder, and the remnants of butter lifted from the dish with her finger. When the fire was really going, Carol used a rag to drop open the stove's heavy door. Heat flooded the room as she slid in the greasy pan. There was nothing to do after that but sit and wait with her cotton doll, Mary Bright, hoping her father would not return before her biscuits were ready. He said she was too old for the doll, but Mary Bright disagreed and would not be put away. Carol also had to hide the fairy picture she had pinned up by her bed, the one that came alive when the moon breathed on it. Fire cracked the bones of sticks. Carol imagined her doll's bones tucked safely into plump cotton flesh. Then she waited, staring at flames that flickered on the surface of her eyes. The grease in the pan was melting quickly. The biscuits would rise up from the heat and light. Like Jesus, Carol thought, our Savior. She tried to remember his eyes from the Bible pictures at school. But years had passed since she'd sat in the classroom, her feet resting on dusty floor planks. The smell of cooking biscuits soon filled the kitchen. Carol imagined hammering and the reluctant hands of carpenters putting his cross together. The wood had once been just an innocent tree, she thought. Before that, a seed in the earth like a tiny eye about to open. Carol stroked her doll's hair. Jesus had flowing locks, she thought. He loved everybody. But that wasn't enough. They killed him anyway. People watched it happen, as though they had something to gain. She thought about those people, wondered where they went after. Home to meals they ate with bare hands. Could they sleep that night after what they had seen? Or did they lay awake in their straw beds, suspended over sleep, crucified themselves by pity for those ebbing bodies on the hill? The look on Jesus' face in the darkness, thought Carol, with no one watching, would have been the pain of disappointment. She knew it well. Maybe all fathers needed forgiving for what they did, or what they didn't do. Even the good ones, like her granddaddy, whose death, her mother once said, set free the pain he had fought to save them from. Carol folded Mary Bright's apron 2 times, then 3. Tried to feel the numb hands and numb feet that Jesus himself must have felt on that day of his crucifixion. Once they had been children's feet, small and warm like bacon biscuits. It was his mama Carol felt most sorry for. She had promised to keep him safe. He was her little baby. Her pain was the worst of all because it was for someone else. She would just learn to live with it, like a shadow no one else could see. Carol's mother had sewn Mary Bright on the yellow tablecloth with her singer machine. It was black and heavy, a cannon that spat thread. The yellow tablecloth still covered the hall table. It had stayed the same while everything else in her life slowly unraveled. Sometimes Carol lay her cheek upon the surface of the yellow tablecloth, between the ghost of her mother's elbows. She had been gone a long time. Carol did not remember much, and so it was not a woman she missed, but a bare foot on the sewing pedal, a voice at the side of her bed, the smell and softness of hair, the spreading of that yellow tablecloth in the woods. Carol's mother was no longer a person at all, but a collection of moments, a bag of precious stones with different weights and colors gently knocking against her life without breaking. After her mother died, Carol felt more like Mary Bright, with eyes to look but never see, and arms to reach but never touch. That was when she believed you could talk to spirits, that the dead were webbed into the corners of our lives. Carol remembered watching her mother sew Mary Bright through the banisters. It was late at night while her daddy was out playing cards with the money from selling the fields. She was so young then, a tangle of bony limbs on stairs, just staring, waiting. A moth drawn to the light of her mother's sewing lamp. When the biscuits were ready, Carol pulled out the pan and fumbled with it. Then she carried a cooling biscuit in her dress to the porch. She sat down on a broken chair, tearing pieces of hot dough and slipping them into her mouth. It must have been close to noon, because nothing had much shadow. Then she heard a faint rumbling, and her daddy's truck appeared in the distance. Once he stayed away for several days. She thought he was dead. The happiness she felt must surely have been a sin. But her daddy's truck was a faded green. It crawled over the dirt like a giant beetle. She could feel her heart beating quickly now, and finished the biscuit in her hands. They'd had a horse before the truck, but he always beat it. She could hear it being beaten from her room. Once it fell down and wouldn't get up, so he put a knife in its mouth. She watched him stop his truck, then sit with his hands on the wheel. There were holes in the porch where the wood was rotten. Carol dreamed he would step through one and just keep going. He'd be with the devil then, and her mother would be safe in heaven. If that happened, her father going to hell through a hole in the porch, Carol knew she'd be just fine, selling fists of foxglove and bluebells for a nickel to people on their way to church. Just sitting there barefoot at the side of the road on a bucket in an old dress with Mary Bright at her side. A flower girl, living on biscuits and well water. If her daddy couldn't walk straight from the liquor, she'd go through the kitchen, grab a biscuit, and run to the woods. But his climb down from the cab seemed deliberate. He looked at the house for a moment, then put his hat on. When he got to the porch steps, he came up slowly, then past his daughter without even a look. Carol wondered if he had died in the night, and this was his spirit returning to linger like the taste of something after it's swallowed. Then he came back out, his overalls and boots still on, clutching a biscuit. He sat down on a crate and took a bite. Carol turned her body toward him, but knew not to look up, not to look at his mouth, kneading the food into a paste. "Lost bad last night," he said finally, staring out at the rusting machines and tall weeds. "Lost so bad that Travis Kirk gonna come by in a while to collect his winnings." Carol had both hands on Mary Bright. What'd he win? The truck? Her father ripped at the biscuit with the teeth he had left. "Not the truck." Carol moved her bare feet on the dusty wood, flattened them, felt the dirt push on her skin. "What then?" "Well, what he win was my daughter." Carol felt dizzy and sick, as though her soul were trying to pull free of her body. Her father got up. His shadow was small and weak in the noon light. "Quit your crying and get your stuff together. It's all been settled. He's coming out today." Carol had dreamed of the day she might leave home, get away from her daddy, even though she'd drag him like a stone through the rest of her life. She pictured herself working in a store, toiling in a flower patch, or sewing things the way her mother had when she was still alive. Her daddy's mouth stretched, but it was not a smile. "I done lost the bet. You know how that works, Carol. And besides, I got plans for your room. I was going over it in the truck. I'm going to get boarders who can pay me a little bit." Carol tucked Mary Bright under her legs. "Truth be told, you ain't hardly worth nothing to me just sitting around. Not like the truck, or the house, or even that barn I'm going to fix up someday. Those things got uses, Carol. They pay their way, whereas you just take. To be honest, you've been taking your whole life. Why, you even took your mother from me. Weared her out with all that stretching and kicking when you was inside of her." Carol stared at the dumb porch planks. White crumbs had fallen from her biscuit and watched her like tiny eyes. She heard him laughing, then. "Why, you're too stupid to know when you was better off. Listen, Carol, he's got hogs, chickens, tobacco, what else? Corn. You can eat your fill of corn. Get nice and round. I'll come visit from time to time. Don't worry about that. You'll see me, I promise." Carol kept her head low as she wept, waiting for the blows that always came as small, bright flashes behind her closed eyes, like the murdering of stars. But for some reason he backed away. Carol heard the clunk of his boots and looked. Her father's head was bowed like a hook. "It's me which should be crying, Carol. I'm the one who lost something. Take a look around. I don't see no other daughter but you." When Carol's daddy had made the bet, the 4 other men at the table fell silent, and he felt he'd already won. From that moment he sensed he would always be above them in some way, prepared to do things they were not. So when, a few moments later, his cards fell short, he just couldn't understand it. His head buzzed with more confusion than anger. The victor, Travis Kirk, Was sitting there like nothing had happened. Carol's daddy peeled the man with his eyes. Look at him just sitting there like a jackass. He's a winner and don't even know it. What does that tell you? Travis Kurt forced a smile and pushed himself away from the table. I just didn't expect it, is all. That ain't no good prize, Travis, said Old Man Walker, a Cherokee from the hills east of town. Some kid on your property running her mouth and taking the best of your bacon. I bet she eat like a mule. Carol's daddy spat out some tobacco and said calmly, Well, you're wrong about that. She hardly eat nothing. You old bastard. You just want her for yourself. Old Man Walker claimed he was a child in the Civil War, had seen men swinging from the covered bridges like ornaments, bodies black with flies. Travis looked at the cards in his meaty hands, unable to grasp how a person's life could be decided by the faded drawings of kings and queens. He arrived a short time later, as her father had promised. His face was red and cologne stung his cheeks where the razor had nicked. There were hornets swarming over a hole in the roof of the house. Travis stood and watched them flit in and out, black dots that from a distance made no sound. Then he listened for voices inside the home, but heard nothing. He seemed unsure now how the transaction would take place. He'd only ever traded animals. All he'd needed then was a length of rope and some water. When he got up on the porch, the front door was open. Inside he saw a yellow tablecloth spread over a wood table. A pair of bare feet stuck out from beneath. They were young feet, with dirty nails and hairs so soft they were almost invisible. Anyone home? The table shook as the feet pulled in. Hello there? Travis said. When the figure beneath the table didn't move, Travis went back to his rusted 1929 Model A and honked the horn. Then he stood on the running board, one hand on the wheel for balance. After a few moments, there was shouting, and Carol's daddy appeared on the porch pulling his daughter by her arm. She was sobbing and letting her legs go limp so she'd fall. Her father thought that was funny. She acting like a trapped coon, Travis, but I swear she's a lady. Travis seemed suddenly afraid of what was happening, and was going to call off the bet when the girl broke free and ran to the barn. Carol's daddy spat tobacco juice and swung his head with irritation. Come on in the house, Travis, so we can discuss this like gentlemen. They both agreed that at 13 she was too young to be married. There weren't many preachers who'd do it unless she was pregnant, and folks in the town would talk, maybe even tattle to someone from the county seat about their card games. It was decided they would tell people she was going to Travis's farm to cook and clean. 13, they agreed, with a year of schooling was enough for anybody, especially a girl, and so it was acceptable for her to commence this kind of work. The two men tried explaining this through the barn door to Carol. It took some effort, but eventually the girl inside believed them and came out. There was nothing on her feet, but that didn't matter. Travis lifted her basket of things from the porch, but Carol wouldn't let him touch Mary Bright. Her daddy sat on a crate and watched his barefoot daughter walk slowly toward Travis's truck. It was so warm you could smell the trees and hear the insects rattling from green pockets. At the last moment, Carol's daddy jumped up. Carol was already in the truck, and Travis was starting the engine, but he flew down the rotten porch steps, flung open the door, and pulled his child out. Travis sat with his hands on the wheel and the basket of girls' clothes beside him as Carol's daddy dragged her back to the house. Weekends, he hollered at the man who'd beaten him at cards. She'll come by on weekends. You'll get her then. Samuel, 1986. Students filed into shop class and stood looking at lathes and baskets of tools. The smell of metal and sawdust was something they knew, having fathers who worked with their hands. Shop class was final period on Friday for 8th graders, so everyone seemed lively and the teacher was in a good mood. They put on worn shop coats, then took from a bucket of scratched safety glasses. Eddie Walker motioned for Samuel Roberts to follow him to a workbench at the back of the shop. They could be alone to discuss skateboarding in the dollar store parking lot, or what kind of pizza had the most cheese, things that were important because they were both 13 years old. Samuel had known Eddie since 2nd grade, when his friend's family moved up to Kentucky from Tennessee. Eddie lived with his mother, but she was not around much now that Eddie could use a microwave and get himself up for school. Samuel had met her a few times. She was always in a hurry, and her face made up, as though at any moment the life she had imagined for herself would suddenly begin. Eddie's father had spent the last 2 years of his life on the run through Alabama and Florida. He was wanted in 3, maybe 4 states. One night he got drunk in a bar, then driving to a motel, stopped to piss in the arc of his headlights. A state trooper came around the corner and hit the car, which slammed into Eddie's father, killing him outright. Eddie often got in trouble at school. Once, when someone called Samuel a dumb fuck, Eddie emptied the boy's backpack in the middle of the playground and stomped on his things until they were in tatters. He was suspended for a day, and his mother had to pay the boy's parents $14. Another time, a high schooler called Mitchell Riggs kicked Samuel's radio-controlled car when they were playing with it on the BMX track. Eddie laughed like it didn't matter, then picked up a rock and drove it into the older boy's lips. The police found Eddie at Samuel's house. There were 2 officers, and they marched him out to the cruiser, one on either side. Over dinner that night, Samuel's father said that Eddie was cursed from day one. It hurt Samuel to hear that, to know some people could be singled out for pain. After Eddie and Samuel found their blocks of wood at the back of the shop room, it was time to pick tools. They lined up with the other students, then chose from an assortment of files, hammers, and chisels that were in metal baskets. Some of the tools were broken and sat at the bottom of the baskets in pieces. Eddie was trying to figure out a way to make his mother a jewelry box, a place to keep the things she felt were most precious. "Right now she's using a shoebox," Eddie said. Sometimes, when she was away, Eddie would go into the box and touch those things. When they heard the teacher shouting, they switched to whispers. "Let's ride our bikes to the dump tomorrow," Samuel said. "We ain't been there in a while." Eddie kept his eyes on the wood. "Imagine if we found a motorcycle or a car nobody wanted. It would be ours, right?" "Yeah, my dad would help fix it up." Eddie's eyes sparkled. "I could live in it. I have to be home by 3 tomorrow, so let's meet there after breakfast." "Why you gotta be home?" "Guess." Eddie shrugged. "Family stuff?" "Knight Rider." "Oh, I love that show. Want to watch it at my house?" Eddie blushed. "I was hoping you'd say that because my mama sold the TV." "Why?" "Actually, she took it to her boyfriend's house because he sold his." At the front of the shop, the teacher was now screaming at a boy with long hair. A moment later, he grabbed the student by the arm and dragged him into the hallway. "What an asshole," Eddie said. "Yeah, if he did that to me," Samuel said, "my mom would have it out with the principal." Eddie laughed. "Yeah, mine too. I wish your mom was our teacher, Samuel. She only teaches 2nd grade. She could teach any grade, I bet." "Well, I wish you could live with us. I'm sure Mom and Dad wouldn't care." "What about Uncle Rusty?" "He's your uncle too, Eddie." The boy looked down at the wood block he wanted to transform into something for his mother, some beautiful object that for a moment might hold her attention. "I wish he was. Uncle Rusty loves everybody, Samuel. He's like Mr. Rogers. I ain't seen that show in a while. Do you still watch it?" "No, do you?" "I guess not," said Eddie. "Though I would if you wanted to, for old time's sake." "If you lived at my house, we could watch Knight Rider, Dukes of Hazzard, and Airwolf. That's Uncle Rusty's favorite. And anything with Coca-Cola written on it, right? Don't forget about that." The teacher must have still been in the hallway because some of the girls were screaming and tossing nuggets of dried glue. Samuel felt carried away by the swell of excitement and grabbed some wood, which he flung impulsively at Eddie, hitting him square in the chin. His best friend was shocked at first, then grinned. "I'll get you back, you son of a bitch." "Call me Michael," Samuel said. "Michael Knight." Eddie laughed. "I'll be Kit." "But that's a machine." "Okay," Eddie shrugged. "Devin Miles, then." Later on, near the end of class, in the clamor of everyone cleaning their workspaces, Eddie snatched a bent nail off the counter and flung it at Samuel just as he looked up. It was a quick, fierce pain. His instinct was to cup his eye with one hand until the burning stopped. He could hear Eddie's voice, asking if he was okay, and if he was faking to please stop. Samuel lowered his hand. "Am I bleeding?" Eddie looked closely. "It's just a lot of white stuff and water. Looks like you got slimed, Egon." "It hurts like hell." "I didn't mean to get your eye," Eddie said. "I was just messing around." Then the bell rang for the end of school. "Help me to the bathroom," Samuel told him, "'cause I don't know if I can walk straight." Eddie's face was ashen as he steadied his best friend down the corridor to the boys' bathroom. They shut themselves in a stall. A thick white syrup was now oozing from the center of Samuel's eye. Eddie started to cry. Mucus streamed out of his nostrils. "Call my mom," Samuel said, his voice shaking. "Tell her to come get us." Alfredia had just walked in from the elementary school when she got the call. A couple of her students missed their buses home, and she'd waited with them. When she arrived at the middle school parking lot and saw the state of her son, she tried to conceal her shock and concentrate on getting him home. Back at the house, she and Eddie took one arm each and helped Samuel inside. Working quickly, she taped tissue over the oozing eye, then wrapped an ice pack in a paper towel and told Eddie to press it lightly against Samuel's head. Then she called and left a message with the doctor's office. Uncle Rusty, who lived with them, was at Walmart, greeting people with yellow smiley stickers. He wouldn't be home until the evening, but had a key he wore around his neck on a red string. While they waited for the phone to ring, Samuel peeled the tissue away from his face and said he couldn't see anything but a red mist through the damaged eye. Alfredia telephoned the doctor again, then dialed the number of her husband's work. Randy was called from the production floor to the factory office. In the background, cars were being bolted together. Alfredia wrote down what he said to do on a pad, which included covering the other eye, as eyes always move together. When she got off the phone, Eddie was crying again. Alfredia touched his hair, trying to detach herself from a prickling anger that threatened to electrify her words. When she spoke, it was in the voice she used for her second-grade students. "It was just innocent horseplay," she said. "You didn't mean it, and you're not to blame. It could very well have been your eye that was in the accident." "I wish it was." "That's because you're his best friend." "I'm his best friend, but I hurt him real bad." "Samuel will be fine." "You'll see, Eddie. Now fix yourself a glass of juice, then go on home. I'll call when we get back and give you an update." The moment he left, Alfredia telephoned the doctor a third time, but he was still out on a call. The receptionist asked what it was about, then said there was an eye clinic in Elizabethtown with an emergency room. Alfredia wrote down the address on her pad, then bundled Samuel into their brown Ford Granada. She was nervous about getting lost, but drove quickly anyway. The tissue over her son's stricken eye was leaking fluid. When they arrived at the clinic, Samuel said he felt faint and needed help getting up. "The worst will soon be over," his mother told him, trying to believe it herself. "The doctor's going to make you feel better." There were a few people in the waiting area, but when they saw Samuel, a woman took him to an exam room right away. The physician wore a clean white coat and striped bow tie. He was very skinny, with a hooked nose like an eagle. He peered into Samuel's eye with a special light, then looked at his watch. "I think I can save it, but I'll have to operate." Alfredia had her pad and pen ready. Her hands were shaking, but she managed to write, "Save it," which she underlined. Samuel was in a daze. The burning had stopped, but he could feel a fizzing at the center of his eyeball. He wondered if he'd have to wear a patch for the rest of his life. What would everyone at school say? Then he wanted his...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?